Hello and welcome to this section on this keyword. We'll try to understand how to use this keyword in this section. So after completing the section, you will be able to understand how to define this keyword, how and where to use this keyword. Then we'll work with exercises and some of the assignments using this keyword. The most important thing that you have to understand is $this is automatically available for us to use inside the class. And we have seen previously with $this you can access the properties and you can access the methods of that class. So we'll go deep down and understand how to work with this keyword. So let's jump into this section now. Hello and welcome to the lecture on this keyword. Let's understand what is this keyword. This keyword allows to access properties and methods of same class. $this indicates the instance of this class. So inside the class, which is a blueprint of an object, you will not have an object instance, right? So $this basically refer to an object instance inside the class. Whichever object is used for that class, $this will refer to that specific object. Okay, and you don't have to declare $this keyword. It's automatically available in this class. And remember, $this refer to the instance of the class, which is nothing but an object. $this always refer to the properties and the methods of this class. So if there is a property that a method want to access inside the class, you access it via the $this keyword. Okay, let's look at an example. So how do you access a property? Let's say you have a car class, you have a property called name, and you have a function called print name. Now the print name method want to access the property of $name. You cannot directly specify the name of the property inside the method. We cannot do this because this is a property of a class and class really is a specification. So you have to have an object of this to access the property of that class. So without any instance, you actually cannot access the property of a class. So how to access class property inside the class methods? This is a very classical example and it's confused most of the people where they don't understand that the property cannot be accessed inside the method of the same class. So how do you access that? Well, you can access it via the $this keyword. So previously we had just had name. Now with this $this, it's referring to the object instance, and that object instance you can use to access the property of that class. You can say $this property name, or you can also say $this method name. Okay, let's look at an example. So you have a car class, you have a name which is pre-assigned to a value. Then you have a function called print name, you have a method called show name. The print name method can access a show name, and show name can access the property of that class. And all this happens via this $this keyword. So once you say $this keyword, you can start accessing the method of that class, or you can also access the property of that class. So if you have $C is equal to new car and you say print name, the print name will call show name, the show name will access the name value. So this is a very classic example of how do you use $this, and using $this what you can access inside the class. Remember, $this is an instance of a class which is predefined available for you to use. And when you're mentioning $this, you're actually saying whatever is the object at the runtime, you're denoting that object with $this. So $this always holds the instance of that class at that particular runtime. So in this example, $C is basically the object. When you try to call the print name, the $this will always refer to $C. So that's basically the notation of $this. $this always refer to the current instance of a class that is trying to access these methods. Okay, so understand $this automatically available, using which you can access property and method of that class inside the class. Okay, you cannot access $this outside the class, you have to access it inside the class itself. So let's do an example and understand how do we work with $this keyword. Hello and welcome to the lecture on how to use $this keyword. So I'm in the amps www folder. Inside oops, I've created a folder called this, and inside this I'll create one class. I'll call it car.php. So let's open this file. We'll create the class first. We'll define one property. We'll call it name. And then we'll try to use $this keyword and try to access the property and methods. There's a classic example of how do you access a property via a method. Okay, how to access properties via methods. Okay, it is done via two methods. This is called as getter methods and setter methods. Okay, this is a standard naming convention that is used to access any property via the methods. Okay, you can find a similar example in other programming languages like Java and C++, where you have getter and setter methods, right? And this is a concept of the OOP wherein which suggests us that if you want to access a property, you can do it via the methods. Okay, how do you define a getter method for a name? Okay, the getter method will look something like this. It starts with get, and then you have the name of the variable. If the name is age, then you do age. If the name is gender, then you do gender, G caps. And if it's name, then you mention is that name. Okay, because it's a get, you will have some return type. You will say it's a string type, and then you have to return this variable. You have to return this property, right? And how you cannot directly return this property here, right? That's where this keyword will help us to return it. Okay, this is already available, and it always refers to the object or the instance of a class that is trying to access this method. Okay, and this will always refer to whatever value for that instance property is set, that will be given back by this method. And there's also a setter method. For it, you have to set the value of the name property. So always the setter methods accept the parameter, right? It has the name or any value that you want to set. So now if you want to set, you are actually setting the instance variable. This is the instance variable or instance property that you're trying to set. Okay, how does this value differentiate? Means how does this name is not this name? Okay, well, $name is a local variable for this method, whereas this is a class variable or class property for that car class. To access this name, you need this object instance. For accessing this, you don't need an instance because it's a local variable. Okay, so it's very important to understand this line. If you're not understanding this line, then you are not pretty understanding what is the concept of this. Okay, this always refer to the instance of this class. An instance of the class access the property of that class, whereas the $name here is referring to this local variable. Okay, it is as similar to as if you say $age is equal to 10, and you have a similar age here. Okay, the difference between the two is this is called as a local variable and this is called as a class properties. And how do you access this inside the method? You have to use $this age. Okay, and how do you access this variable? You can directly access that. Okay, so that's the difference between $this age and the normal age. And if you see the $sign here, you don't have a $sign, but here you have a $sign. Okay, anything that you're accessing via this keyword will always refer to the class properties. Okay, anything that you're accessing without this is basically referring to the local variables inside that method. Okay, I hope it's very clear. I'm going to delete this off. Okay, so remember the syntax of a getter method and a setter method. The get method will always start with lowercase get, and set methods always start with lowercase set. And then whatever the variable value that you have will have the naming convention. Okay, get will always have return type, set will always have a parameter passed to that function. Okay, set will always set the property, get will always get the property. Okay, so if you are trying to access this, you can say car1 is equal to new car. Okay, we'll do example 1 with using getter setter methods. Car1 set name, setting the name of the car, that is BMW, and then you can echo out the car name, then you can say get name. Okay, it's very a classic example of how do you set and get a value, and how do you change. Let's do an example 2. How do you change the properties from outside? Okay, you can always change the name of the car from outside. Okay, and again you can display the value. And let's do a final example of independent objects. So let's define car2 and assign some value to car2. And we'll print car1 and car2. Okay, one thing to remember, whatever objects that you are creating here, car1, car2, and then you are calling the same method, right? And inside that method you don't know which instance you are working with, you're just saying this instance. So when you are using car1, the $this will refer to car1, but when you are calling from car2, it will refer with the car2. Okay, so this is basically a generic keyword which actually represents the instance of that class at that moment. Okay, so car1 we already set to Ferrari, and car2 will set to Hyundai. So by changing car1, the car2 will not get affected. Okay, so let's look at that example now. Okay, so we have BMW coming up, we have Ferrari coming up, then we have Hyundai coming up from the car2. Car1 and car2 basically are the independent objects, and even though you have $this to represent the instance of this, it understands when you pass in car1 and car2, it understands which instance it has to change the value. Okay, so that's how you basically use the $this keyword to access the property of that class, and it actually represents the instance of that class at that particular moment. Okay, so that's all the exercise on how to work with $this keyword, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the exercise section on $this keyword. So I want you to do this exercise. Okay, let's understand what is the exercise all about and what you need to do as part of this exercise. You have to define a student class, and then you have to define two properties inside the student class, name and class. Okay, that is the property of the class. Then you have to define get and set methods to set and access the property via the methods. You have to define get name and set name, get class and the set class, and using which you set this property of the class. Then you have to define a method called print details to print both of the properties. Do this exercise and share the exercise file with me. I'll see the exercise file and give you my feedback on this. Well, you can pause the video and do the exercise, or you can continue to watch the video. Okay, so let's build this class. We'll call it as student. I'll bring it to some live. You have to define two properties. class. Then we have to define getter and setter for name and class. And the notation is smaller case get and smaller case set, right? Now you have to say name, class. Okay, so let's define the get method. So get name basically return a value, okay, and the return value is name, and we return it via this keyword. Remove the $, and you're done with the get name. Set name accepts a value. So typically we tend to use the same name and then we use $this to differentiate it. Okay, then we can say $this name is a $name. Okay, here we forgot the return statement. Just add the return statement here to return that value, and here we are setting that value. Okay, the same thing you can do it for get class. Here to class, then you can have the class variable here. Okay, so you're done with the getter and setter methods for two of these properties, name and class. And remember how we have done the naming convention for getter and setter. You have to follow this. You cannot just write get like this and then start writing the getter and setter. You have to follow this naming convention. That's why we have first written the get and set, then we have written the variable name or a property name to it by making the first letter as caps. Okay, and then we have to have a function called print details, which basically do an echo statement. We can say okay, so this is the statement in which we are accessing the properties of that class. Okay, let's create the instance of this class. So we'll create two students, students1, student1 and student2, and then we'll assign the value to student1. We can say set name, then we can say set class, and then we can add the same details for student2. Is in 5th class. Then we can say student1 print the details, then student2 print the details. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we have written. We have written a student class with two properties, then we have the getter and the setter method for name and the class, then we have pre-details method which actually prints the name and the class. We have created two objects, two instances of the student. We have set the name, set the class for both that instance, and then we are printing the details. Okay, so let's execute this. Okay, so John Smith is studying in 1st class, Jacob is studying in 5th class. Okay, so remember how we have played around with this. Okay, we have used it to assign the properties using the method, and this is a standard way that you will see in most of the OOPS programming. Everyone follow this method. This method of accessing the property via a method, accessing and setting the value via the method. To access you say getter methods, for setting you set the setter methods, and this is the standard definition of writing getter and setter methods. And the most important thing in getter and setter method is how do you access that property of the class, and it's done via the this variable. Well, that's the exercise for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to the lecture on assignments. So the assignment is to create a calculator class. Okay, and we will try to use this keyword inside this class. So here is the steps that you need to follow to create the assignment. You have to create a calculator class. You have to define 3 properties, $a, b, and result. You have to write getter and setter methods to access these properties. Then you have to write an add method, and in that add method, whatever values that you add, you store it in the result property. Then using the get results method, you try to print the results. Well, that is the assignment I want you to do so that you get used to how to work with $this keyword. Well, all the best for your assignment, and once you do your assignment, post it into the Q&A section and I'll have a look and I'll provide my feedback to you. Okay, so that's all for this lecture on assignment, and I'll see you in the next one. Well, that's the end of this section on this keyword, and I hope by now you should be able to understand how to define this keyword, how and where to use this keyword, and you have done the exercises and assignments using this keyword. Well, that's the end of this section on this keyword, and I'll see you in the next one.